Okay, so we're now recording, and again, just a very quick kind of welcome to this session as part of Placement Action Week. Successful placement students tell all, where we're going to be hearing from 5 of our Level 6 placement reps, who I'll be introducing in a second. A quick introduction from me. I'm Chris Webb. I'm a member of the SHU Careers and Employability Service. So I'm a senior employability advisor working with the Art and Design Department. So some of you on the call might know me already. And I'm here really just to facilitate. So I will stop talking very shortly. These are our speakers who I'm going to get to introduce themselves. But before I do that, just a very kind of quick note that any questions that you've got sort of during the session over the next hour, do kind of pop them into the chat. But we've also got an online poll, which I'm going to put in the chat as our speakers are introducing themselves. This is where you can submit any anonymous questions you might have throughout the session. So again, if there's anything, any kind of concerns, any questions, pop them into the chat on Zoom, either privately to myself or to everyone, and we can kind of pick them up as we go through. But without further ado, we'll move on to our introductions. I'll kind of pick you out one by one, guys, if that's okay, just to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your course, your placement, and the sort of the role that you were doing there. So Lottie, if we can start with you, is that okay?
Yep, that's fine. So hi, I'm Lottie. I studied business analytics and I did my placement at IBM. I was working on the service delivery team. It was based in Warwick, but I did the whole year working from home. And yeah, a bit of my role, I was on a few different, I worked with a few different managers in the problem management team, and also mainly with the service delivery manager as well.
That's great, Lottie. Thanks very much. That's perfect. Jack, if we can move on to you.
Hi, I'm Jack. I worked as a junior IT support engineer at Sheffield Teaching Hospitals. And yeah, I literally worked as a junior IT engineer, but basically I fixed ultrasounds, I fixed any medical equipment, and also just fixed PCs as well. So it was quite a diverse role, but I didn't work a single day from home.
Brilliant, Jack. Well, we're going to come on to that, I think, when we talk about some of the challenges, but really interesting to hear that. Kira, can we come on to you next?
Yeah. So my name's Kira Hawkins. I do food and nutrition. Obviously I've just done a placement year, and it was in Portadown in Northern Ireland. I worked as a QA assistant, which is like quality assurance auditor's assistant. So I just helped in their daily day-to-day tasks of running a chicken food factory. And I had to work in the factory because it wasn't a job able to work from home, so it was very interesting to say the least, but I'll leave it there.
Great, thanks, Kira. Very diplomatic. Yeah, we'll perhaps come on to that afterwards. That's great. Okay, we'll come on to Erin next. Erin, if we can come over to you.
Hi, I'm Erin. I study human biology at SHU, obviously, and I did my placement at Agilent Technologies, which is a big life sciences company, and I was technical inside sales intern. And I was based in Manchester, but again, worked from home the entire time due to COVID, but it was still very enjoyable. So
that's great. Thanks, Erin. Glad it was a good experience. As you say, remote working is always a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
And last but not least, Anna, who thankfully you managed to find us, you managed to get onto the Zoom. So I know there was a problem with the link I provided. My fault. So Anna,
sorry, it might have been.
Over to you.
Hi, I'm Anna. I do accounting economics. I'm in my last year now. I did a placement at BHP Accountants as assistant accountant level 3. I assisted seniors on a number of audits. There's internal audits, external audits, grant audits. So just a lot of financial audit, basically. Majority of it was working from home, but I did get to go out on client site and do a bit of work from the office towards the end of it.
That's great, Anna. Thanks. Sounds really interesting. And again, we'll kind of perhaps pick up a little bit more about that as we go through the session. Brilliant. So those are our kind of placement reps who've joined us today. In terms of kind of the agenda, what we're going to be talking about, we've done our introductions. We're going to move on to talk about some frequently asked placement questions that have come from sort of previous second year students, current second year students, which we feel will kind of cover quite a lot of the questions that people might have. But we're also leaving some time for you, the audience, to ask some questions as well. So any kind of questions you have, as I mentioned, there's 2 ways that you can ask them. One is to kind of put the questions in the chat on Zoom. Again, either send them to myself directly as a private message or put them in for everyone, and we'll pick up those questions either as we go along or at the end of the session. Or alternatively, we've got an online kind of poll system called Poll Everywhere, which basically you can kind of submit questions anonymously that will then go through at the end. I'll make sure to put the link in the chat for Poll Everywhere so that you can just click on it, put it into your mobile or put it into your web browser and submit questions as you go throughout the session. But as I say, any questions, anything you want to ask, do make sure you're just sharing it with us in the chat and we can pick it up as we go through. So this is kind of going to bring us on really to our frequently asked placement questions. And again, we'll kind of make sure everyone's got a chance to sort of answer these and go through as many of these as we can. So our first question is around how you secured your placement, question that we always get asked by students going through the second year placement search process. So I'm just going to come through everyone in order of where you are on my screen. So Jack, if I can kind of bring you in first, can you tell us a little bit about how you got your placement?
So mine was kind of, the placement is, I used a really, really old system, right, called UniHub, which doesn't exist anymore. We don't use it anymore, but I got my placement through UniHub, and then I got the interview and I did it all through that, but now it's all through Handshake. So I did it the old UniHub way, but that's how I got my placement.
Thanks, Jack, and yeah, good bit of brand management there. Yeah, we have moved over. So if you hear anyone today mentioning UniHub, that's absolutely fine. That was the platform we used to have for kind of jobs and placements. It's now moved on to Handshake, which hopefully you'll be familiar with if you're watching this call. So, and Jack, anything else in there in terms of, I suppose, kind of the steps in the process? Anything in there that was once you'd applied through UniHub, what sort of steps did you have to take in order to kind of secure it?
I think the placements administrator, that's a long word. So the placement administrator got back to me saying that they wanted to offer an interview. They sent the interview through. I went on Teams, I did the interview, and then by a couple days, I got an email back from the administrator saying, "Oh yeah, the trust want to offer you a job." I was like, "Oh." I was expecting a week. I was expecting it to come in a week, not like 2 days.
So that's it's a really good point to make, actually. So again, even with sort of Handshake this year, if you're a placement seeking student, some of the placements you'll see will be ones that Hallam frequently offer and it will frequently work with employers to offer students. So when Jack was talking about a placement administrator there, that will be people from our work experience team who are maybe kind of working with employers to promote those opportunities. And it might be that some of the application process is actually managed by the university. So keep a lookout for those type of roles as well. Kira, can I come to you next? You're next on my selection of squares.
Yeah. So I basically just looked online for mine. I did also look for UniHub, but I just kind of put into Google placements and then followed by my degree, or kind of the relevant role or sector I kind of wanted to go in, just if you wanted to look in general. So I applied from it, just submitting my CV and a cover letter, and then I got an email back saying that I had an interview. They originally wanted to do face-to-face, but due to COVID, it changed to just a phone call. And then literally a couple of days later, because it was towards basically the start of the academic year, they offered me a placement and I accepted and I moved.
That's great. Thanks, Kira. Yeah, really thorough process. And I mean, you mentioned obviously yours was, so it was based in Northern Ireland, the actual placement itself, was it?
Yes. Yes. So yeah, I mean, very scary, but don't be afraid because everyone will help you to move. Like uni was great in offering to help, as well as my actual placement, like the people at my park, the young careers people, I can't exactly remember what you call them, young careers maybe, but they offered me to help with finding accommodation or just any questions in general about moving over to a new place. They offered help, so people are willing if you are willing to put in the effort as well.
That's great. Thanks, Kira. We'll come back to that maybe a little bit later when we talk about the support that placement students receive, but really good to hear that you certainly got that. Erin, if we can come on to you next, is that okay?
Yeah, I also found it on UniHub. It was advertised on UniHub and I applied through the link, which I think just took me to the company website, and I applied through that. And then I was very quickly put in touch with a recruiter that works for the company. And I had 2 phone calls with her. And then she passed me on to the actual hiring manager, who turned out to be my boss. And I had a face-to-face interview with him. And funnily enough, that was the only time I met him in person and went into the office actually at my interview, because I wasn't able to go in any other time during my placement because of COVID. And then I had to like do a presentation at the interview, and like either 2 days later or 1 day later, they offered me the job by phone. So yeah, it was very quick.
Wow, and how strange that was the only time that you got to actually be there in the office. Yeah,
I know. Yeah.
Are you planning to go back at any point, maybe just to see it physically, or?
Yeah, it would be nice. Yeah, I mean, I went to drop like my laptop off, my work laptop off, but I didn't properly go in. So yeah, it was strange.
Yeah. But a really good example, I guess, of of how many of these placement roles now can be remote. We've seen obviously a huge uplift in this in the past 18 months. So Anna, if we can kind of come over to you now, you're next on my list.
So I found my placement through actually Googling, but I wasn't searching for Googling placements. I was just Googling what kind of accountancy firms there are in Sheffield. I wasn't planning to move too far away, so I thought to myself, if I didn't find a placement in Sheffield, because obviously in coronavirus I didn't really feel comfortable moving that far, then I'll just go on my last year. But I came across BHP, and they had an application form, which it was a bit unusual. You didn't have to send a CV and a cover letter. They had their own application form where they asked you a couple of questions, and they ask you about like your biggest achievements and things like that. Then that was automatic. You got put through to an online test. It was just mathematical to see if you've passed in time and things like that. Then there was your first interview with the HR people, and then I got through to my second interview, which was with the audit manager and seniors. And then about a week later, I got a call on a Friday evening saying, you got replacement.
That's great. I mean, it's a really good point as well, Anna, about, I suppose, the difference between some of the application processes that are out there, which is really important to mention. But also, I think for people who might be keen to stay in the local area, it's worth noting that, yes, you can kind of target your placement search in that way if you want to. And both Kira and Anna have mentioned, Google, it's not something that, we'd always say it's the first thing that you look at, but actually can be a really effective tool for kind of locating placement opportunities or companies, as Anna mentioned. So really, really good advice there. And Lottie, if we come on to you last for this question, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. So I actually met the IBM recruiters at our careers fair, I think it was in 2019 in October. And that's how I found out about my placement. And then I applied, I think it was around this time, or a bit, maybe November. I had some online tests to do. It was a bit similar to Anna's process. And then I got invited to go to Portsmouth to do an assessment centre where I had to present in front of one of the assessors and get involved with teamwork. And then it's quite similar to Erin, actually. I got invited to a business interview at the account in Warwick. It was in February. Then that was the only time I went into the office. And then it was quite scary, to be honest. I didn't actually get offered the job until June because they were unsure that they were going to offer it because of the pandemic. So it was quite a long process, but worth it, yeah.
Well, that's great. And yeah, as you say, having done a lot of that groundwork already, that must have felt, quite sort of, anxious, I guess, process getting to that point in the year. But it sounds like, you certainly deserved the position. It sounds like it's been a really, really good placement for you. So
yeah, it's great. Thanks.
That's great. Thanks, Lottie. So yeah, some really, really good points there. I think particularly just there from Lottie mentioning about the careers fair. This was obviously back in 2019. We've actually got our Hallam virtual careers fair next week. So if you've not kind of seen that already, that event is on Handshake. There's 2 days, one on the 20th, one on the 21st of October, covering different areas, including kind of business, digital, creative, engineering, the sciences, and about sort of 50 plus employers each day. So although it's not in person, still that opportunity to kind of connect with employers who are going to be offering placement opportunities. So do keep an eye out for that. Ooh. So we've talked a little bit about kind of how you've secured it. I think most of you have sort of mentioned kind of how long the process took for the placement that you secured. What's kind of sometimes useful to know is how long it took you in total, and I guess really how many placements you'd applied to before you ended up getting the one that you got. And this is always quite interesting to hear the answers. So if we kind of work backwards from here, maybe, Lottie, we start with you again. You've obviously mentioned about how long it took with IBM, waiting till June that year to get the placement confirmed. Was that the only placement you applied for, or did you apply for other options as well?
I think I applied to about 5. I got a few no's, and it's okay to get no's because it obviously wasn't meant to be. I did get invited to an interview at Johnson & Johnson, but that clashed with the IBM one, so I just decided to go with the IBM one. It was a similar process, but it was weird. It was the exact same day of the one in Portsmouth, so I couldn't go to both.
Ah, okay, yeah, and that's can be a difficult thing when you're balancing maybe multiple applications at once. Did you get any good feedback from any of the ones that you did apply for but weren't successful with?
Yes, it was mainly because they were wanting someone more technical. But to be honest, I've gained some skills. I've learned to code and stuff from IBM, so that was great. So yeah, I think it was just I didn't tick all the boxes for my degree and stuff because I'm more business related. But yeah, I think that was about it.
No, that's great, Lottie. And really, really good point about that idea that, you know, it doesn't have to be a negative. You know, it's going to happen that you might get no's, whether it's in the placement or kind of, you know, further on when you're applying for maybe graduate roles. And actually what you can take from that can be really useful in terms of, you know, future applications. So it's a really, really good point. Anna, can we come back to you? Yeah, what was your sort of situation, I guess, in terms of placements? Did you get the first one you applied for, or did you apply for a few others before you ended up at BHP?
I've applied for about 8 to 9. I would say replacement, it's better to get your applications in before December, because a lot of the good placements were placements you tend to wish to end up in. Their application days close in November, some of them even October, especially the big firms. So for example, for accountancy, if you're hoping to secure a Big 4 placement, I'm pretty sure their applications close end of October or November. So you really have to be quick on that. Whereas with confirming the placement, so similar to Lottie's situation, BHP were unsure. After the phone call they originally made offering me a replacement, they've actually had to cancel that and come back due to a pandemic. They said, sorry, we're unable to offer it. But then 2 weeks later, they gave me another call saying, actually, we don't think it will last as long, so we can still offer you a placement with a reduced number of months. So instead of a 12-month placement, I did an 8-month placement starting in January. And that was confirmed, I believe, end of July. So I've applied back in October and actually got the full thing confirmed end of July. So it is quite a long process, I think.
Yeah, that's great, Anna. Really good to kind of get that, you know, reflection so people can see, you know, sometimes how long that process can take. I mean, it's, you know, it's worth noting for anybody kind of, I suppose, sort of listening in today, that the university deadline is, you know, is usually the 31st of July. So there is more time than a lot of people think in order to secure a placement for each year. But a really good point from Anna about deadlines. Absolutely right. A lot of larger companies with kind of quite well-established placement schemes tend to recruit between September, October, and sort of December, January. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean they're the only companies recruiting. Quite a lot of the smaller and sort of medium-sized companies tend to recruit actually a little bit later in the year. But it's a great point that really the earlier you start, the better in terms of getting the most access to opportunities that are out there. So thanks for sharing that, Anna. Erin, if we come on to you, what was your sort of experience like?
Yeah, I applied for one placement, I think November or December, and then I didn't get that one. And on reflection, I probably should have applied to more at the same time. I think I just thought, oh, I'll just apply to one at a time, because I was like, what if I get that one and then I don't know what to do? But yeah, anyway, it did work out well because I applied to Agilent, I think in January, and that role was so much better suited to me than the one that I didn't get. Like sales is what I want to do rather than like lab-based stuff. So I applied to Agilent in January and then had the phone calls and then the interview in mid-March, and then got offered the job in mid-March. So it only took around 2 months or a bit over. So quite short compared to other people. Yeah.
But no, that's really good to be aware of, Erin. I think particularly around, even with what seems like a fairly short process, that it could still be a couple of months. And I think it's worth remembering that the average recruitment window for most jobs, whether it's placements or graduate jobs, is usually around 2 months. So it does mean that, you can be looking at other options and applying for other options, as you mentioned as well.
Yeah.
Kira, what was your sort of experience like? Obviously, somewhat different from what you mentioned in terms of the placement itself.
It was very interesting. My from like actual starting it and getting my placement, it probably took about 11 months with the pandemic including. So it was a really long time. I applied to about 6, maybe 7, maybe even more. And like in terms of advice, I would just say apply to all of them, because even if you go to the interviews and you don't get them, it's just good experience, because you learn from previous questions of what one employer might ask and you can take it on to the next. But that being said, I went to quite a few interviews. And then I found that I was quite nervous, and I get quite flustered when I'm in person. And then obviously I applied for the Smy Park one back in March, and they said that I'd been successful. However, a couple of weeks later, they said we're gonna have to withhold the application process because of COVID. And then it wasn't until about June, July time that when we're gonna reopen the chance of the placement. Do you still want an interview? And obviously I said yes. And then I had my interview a couple of weeks later after that. And then a few weeks after, about a week later, they went, do you want the job, basically offering me? And I said yes. And then obviously I had the whole process of like accepting it and then moving. So in total, for just my park, it took me about 6 months, but that's obviously due to COVID as well. So although I got it like after the cut-off, the university suggests by July time, obviously I got it in August. The university was actually quite accommodating in terms of letting me change from final year to a placement year. So if you do get a last minute, I wouldn't worry, because everyone is willing to help you, and it's an easy process to change from final year to placement student.
Yeah, thanks, Kira. I think it's a really important thing to mention, because we do have it happen every year. I think there's often worries about, what happens if it goes past the 31st of July. I mean, for anyone who's looking for kind of placement opportunities on the call, it's worth remembering that the 31st of July each year is a soft deadline for the university. As Kira mentioned, if you find a placement between then and the academic year, the university is not going to stop you. That they want you to, secure a placement if that's what the right thing for you is. So, yeah, it's a good point that even if it can feel last minute, the support's there from the university to help with the authorization and, relocation process. So really, really good reflections. Jack, I'll come on to you last. I know, you made it sound like an incredibly easy process, securing your placement. Was it the only one that you went for, or was it?
I think I went for like 10. I did blocks of, when I apply for anything, I'll apply for blocks of 10. So if I've applied to 10 employers, I go, right, another 10, because then I'm maximizing my chance. I think there's 2 placements I got turned down for. I got turned down by West Yorkshire Police on preferred placement, which I was a bit sad about, because they said, oh, you need more technical knowledge. Now I've gone on this placement and I've got more knowledge than I thought I'd have. And then I got turned away by a school in Belgium, like an international school. And that was sad, because I wanted to go abroad for a year and not be in England for a bit. But I was happy with this placement because I gained a lot of knowledge, and I know more about computer networks than I did beforehand.
That's great. Thanks, Jack. And yeah, I mean, you've raised a really good point there, that obviously one thing we haven't kind of touched on, although Kira's touched on it with her placement, is that the opportunity for international placements. That's obviously something which, over the past couple of years has been quite difficult. There have been restrictions that have, made it difficult with the university guidance for some students to go internationally. So that is something that should be, if you're looking for placements academic year 2022 onwards, hopefully something that's less of a barrier. So again, if you are looking for international placements, it's worth noting that it's perhaps slightly more challenging than looking for placements in the UK, but there are opportunities there, as kind of Jack's mentioned. So yeah, good that we've managed to kind of get that in as well. There is a question in the chat which I'll pick up, because it's not necessarily placement related, so I'll kind of pick that one up myself. You've talked a little bit about the application process, so we won't perhaps cover that, but what would be really interesting to hear is about the activities that you've actually done on placement, which you've kind of mentioned a bit in the introductions, but I think it's something we always get asked is, what was it actually like? What was your day-to-day role like? And what was expected of you really as a placement student? So I'm going to mix things up a bit now, and I'm going to come to Erin first, if that's okay. So Erin, what sort of activities did you get up to on placement? What was the kind of expectation for you in your role as a placement student?
So it was quite varied on my placement. It's quite a dynamic role because it's technical inside sales. There's a technical side and the sales side. So I was dealing with customers, answering the phones and answering emails, but also my main role was to expand the business and find new customers. So that involved doing a lot of research and knowing what I'm talking about, with the products. I had to do a lot of product training, and it's all because I was in the genomics team, so it's all very complicated, different equipment, because the company sells really complex lab equipment basically, and I had to have a good knowledge of our genomics portfolio in order to find who would suit that, look into universities and different businesses, and find anyone that I could talk to. I use LinkedIn quite a lot as well, and tried to reach out to different scientists, and then I did manage to make a few sales and have Zoom calls with professors from universities, and that was very scary because it was a bit like imposter syndrome, because I hadn't even graduated yet and I'm trying to tell them about our complex genomics product, whereas they've got a doctorate. But it was really interesting. I had a lot of support from my team, and yeah, a really dynamic role. I really enjoyed it.
I'm really pleased in a way that you've kind of mentioned about imposter syndrome, Erin, because I think it is something that comes up in conversations that I know a lot of placement supervisors have with their kind of placement students. So how did you feel sort of that you overcame that, I guess, during the year, and what sort of maybe helped, I suppose, in helping you feel that you did belong there, that you had a lot to offer, I suppose?
I think a lot of it was the support from my team and my boss. I told my boss we had weekly check-ins and stuff at the start, and then whenever I needed to talk to him, he'd be like, yeah, give me a call, and I'd just tell him how I'm doing and things, and he was very supportive. Yeah, I had that when I first started, when I graduated uni. You do feel like you're not fully qualified, but it just comes with experience, and also I tried really hard to build on my knowledge of the products, and if I knew the product inside out, then it was there's no reason for me to feel like I'd feel that imposter syndrome, because I'm competent at being able to put that across to the customer and tell them exactly what our product does and things like that. And I also wasn't expected to know everything, all the technical knowledge. We had specific people that were the really technical people. My role was a sales role. So just having enough knowledge and just speaking to my peers, that's what helped.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's a really good point that, and this is what the university communicates with any placement employer is, we know these are students who've come to the end of the second year, as you said, you're developing, you're an early career starter, and it's supposed to be a developmental process. So it's great to hear that your team were really on board with that and really kind of understood that process. So it sounds really positive. Brilliant, thanks, Erin. Lottie, can I bring you in? What was sort of your kind of day-to-day like on the placement, and what was sort of the experience like coming into that environment?
Yeah, so I had quite an early start. It wasn't actually expected of me, but I ended up starting at 7:30 in the morning from my laptop and getting around to checking emails and stuff. But it did allow me, starting early, to have longer breaks throughout the day, and my managers were really comfortable with that, because it was quite new to me, but everyone seemed to do most of the work in the morning, and then in the afternoon it was a lot quieter. But my role, it was on the service delivery team, and the whole account managed the service for the electronic staff record for the nurses in the NHS in the UK and Wales. So it works out. It was managing about 7% of the UK workforce or something. So we had to make sure that we were doing our job right. And how I came into that was basically monitoring the unavailability periods of the service and then highlighting any inconsistencies in the data and stuff. I then also took on the role on the problem management team. So I worked quite closely with the authority team at the NHS and made sure if they had any problems, then I dealt with them because my manager was quite busy. But yeah, it was quite a good learning experience. A bit like Erin, I got that client face-to-face experience, which was great, and also hosting the meetings really did build my confidence. But at the beginning, I wasn't expected to know anything. They were really understanding, just coming from uni, and I slowly built the skills to be able to host things and present things on my own and stuff.
Well, it sounds like a really sort of diverse role. And as you said, involved in some really high profile projects as well. I mean, IBM is sort of obviously a name that, as you mentioned, a lot of people know, be familiar with. What was it kind of like being on the other side of that? What was it like working for a company with that sort of high profile reputation, I guess?
It was really good. There was an amazing intern community. So I got to network, not just in the Warwick account, but in all across the UK, really. And yeah, the support was amazing. It was overwhelming, and at the beginning I felt like I'd been thrown in the deep end because I had no handover process from my previous intern, but everyone made sure that if I had a question that it was answered, and I found that if I just kept on asking questions, then that was the best thing to do, really. But yeah, it was really, really supportive network.
That's great. I know, always really good advice, asking questions. You know, there are no silly questions really in work. I think often coming in, Erin mentioned a bit about imposter syndrome, but almost every job that you ever start, you know, people find themselves in that position. So it's such a great piece of advice. Jack, if we come on to you with a little bit of an NHS connection from what Lottie was saying, we come on to your role.
So I was in second line support. So second line support is like just all the queries you have. If your PC's broken, I get called out to have a look at your PC. But my job varied, so I could either be one day fixing a PC or fixing a printer. Another day I'm patching networks in and changing the network. Most notably, I helped IT deploy a project with virtual desktops over into the Hallamshire Hospital. They brought it over from A&E and they wanted to bring it for the minor injuries, and I helped to deploy that. So it's a varied role. I think I did all sorts. So basically, I was in from 9 till 5, and I literally just went through all my tickets and just went, right. That's my job.
Did you mention, Jack, were you in? You were in the whole time, is that right?
Yeah, I've never, like, if anyone says, have you worked from home? No, not worked a single day from home. I've done 12 months in the Hallamshire Hospital, going in and out, survived 2 COVID outbreaks and never got COVID.
You need to get a T-shirt for that.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to go and print. I'm going to get one printed now, and I'll come to uni saying survived 2 COVID outbreaks, didn't get COVID. And
so what was what was it like being in that environment then? So kind of going into a hospital, as you say, you know, in the middle of a pandemic, it's a healthcare environment, but your role is obviously not healthcare related. What was that sort of experience like?
Because basically when there's nurses and stuff that put these tickets in, they're always coming to work like us when we come out, and they're really like they're not upset, but they can see that it's not working. So we understand that. But we had like COVID procedures in. So if it was on a COVID red zone, we wouldn't go in unless you actually needed us to go in. So basically, if it was a kiosk that had broke, which was just like a laptop they have on wheels, basically they just push it out to us, clear it out, clean it out. We'll take it back to our office, fix it, clean it again, and then send it back to them. So we didn't have, I think there was 3 times where I've been on COVID wards, and literally most of the patients are isolated. So sometimes they just say, yeah, just come on for 5 minutes, fix that printer.
Yeah, and these are often the stories, aren't they, I guess, from the last 18 months that people don't really hear about on the news, is the jobs that were supporting everything within healthcare. So really, really interesting. From kind of NHS and supporting, I guess, sort of people during the pandemic to chickens, Kira. we're going to come on to you. So tell us a bit about Moy Park and tell us a bit about the work, which sounded like a really kind of interesting, varied placement you were doing there.
Yeah, I mean, it was a shame because my placement was actually rotational, but due to COVID and the fact that I couldn't drive, they just let me stay in one factory. So our factory had 2 sites that had cooked, so like ready to eat products, so like you're ready to eat like whole bird roasts, and then you had uncooked, so like your chicken goujons that you would get in shops, and I worked on the uncooked side, so which was the lower risk side. So it was obviously it was still a priority to ensure safety, but it obviously wasn't as nervous and scary working in high risk. So I would often pick up things that the QAs would normally do, such as calibration of equipment, taking temperatures of all the areas within the factory to making sure that it was the right temperature for the chicken, obviously. And I also did quite a few quality checks on the actual product, so making sure that the product looked like the specification that we got from the start, basically until it was packed away in boxes. I did taste panel every day, so I got like 5 products throughout the day and tested them, making sure they were according to specifications. I did calibrations, and just basically anything else that they asked of me. I think they were mostly what I did because it did take quite a long time to do some of the stuff, and obviously I only worked from 8 till 4 every day, luckily. But throughout that entire time I was on my feet, you know. I didn't really get to sit down much, so it was a very active job. Some of the other things I helped with was filing away paperwork, sorting that out, or getting paperwork that they needed for like BRC and things like that. If you work in the food industry, you would probably know what that kind of means. So like if an external auditor came in, I would help and find the paperwork for that. And yeah, again, just anything else that they kind of needed, I would be like, oh, I'll help out. There was some very different days, very long days, just making sure that the product was right and safe to eat, to go out to the shops, basically.
Wow, fantastic. And how did you find this sort of tapped into the degree that you're doing at the moment, whether that's kind of applying the knowledge you already had or bringing it back, I guess, to the final?
So I kind of had a long running project throughout my placement, so I don't really know if I can disclose it, to be honest, but the project that
don't disclose if you feel it.
I don't know if I am allowed, but the project basically just kind of helped within the factory to improve certain aspects of it, and I guess my course kind of gave me the background knowledge for that, what I could look into within the factory and what areas I could have improved on and stuff like that. And basically just the basic knowledge of some stuff from the for backgrounds, like what chickens should be kept at, temperatures, how it works, some of the equipment in general, and just stuff like that. It's unless you it sounds kind of weird, but unless you're on the course, like it's kind of hard to describe some aspects of it. But my course did help along with the placement, but I wouldn't say not necessarily like you just needed the background knowledge, basically. It wasn't too strenuous.
No, and that's good to actually mention, Kira, because I think it's important for everyone to note that the placement definitely doesn't have to be directly connected to sort of what you're doing knowledge-wise in the degree. It's kind of that combination of knowledge and skills that you can apply then to a placement setting. So it sounds like there was a good baseline, but actually you ended up doing some really different things that gave you new skills as well, which is
totally. In terms of modules, like actually first and second year to do with my placement, I probably only did about 1.5 modules for my placement, if that makes sense. I mean, don't get me wrong, all the other modules were great, but I would say it was a different part of my park. And my other modules came in handy because when I worked with other departments, I knew what they were going on about and I could kind of input on that. So yeah.
That's great. That's really good to hear. And Kira, we've actually had a comment in the chat, I think privately to me. If you're happy to maybe kind of share your email address for people to get in contact? Someone's quite interested in finding out a bit more about Moy Park and your placement.
Yeah,
so.
sorry, they direct messaged me, but I
That's
wasn't
fine.
sure like to give my email just because of policies and things like that. So I said to ask you first.
That's fine. So either email or LinkedIn or whatever's easiest is
Yeah.
absolutely fine, as long as you're happy to share it. That's
Yeah.
no problem. So,
Brilliant, thank you.
brilliant. And Anna, just finally on to you, just in terms of kind of your placement, again, tell us a little bit about what life at BHP was like, and I guess in terms of the degree as well, has it sort of been connected in any way to what you've done before or what you're planning this year?
So I think pretty much all the modules I've done from my first 2 years were quite relevant. Maybe not directly, but when you're looking at more of rather than the numerical side of the audit, where the analytical review side of it, the kind of business knowledge would be quite useful. So one of the things we did is comparing prior year's figures of a firm to this year's figures, and that's where things like knowledge about like shareholders and obviously the current business environment, how the pandemic affected businesses, that'd be quite helpful. So my normal day, I'd usually start about 9 and it'd be till about 5:30 with an hour lunch break. But I was usually on the job for about a week or two, depending on how big the job was. So depending on how big the job is, that's how many assistants you will get. On most of them, I was the only assistant or part of a 2 or 3 little group of 2-3 assistants. So I do things like checking invoices, looking at paperwork for like assets and things like that. And if I wasn't sure about anything, speak to the accountant or the client.
That's great, Anna. And in terms of, I suppose, you mentioned about kind of looking locally, and obviously BHP was sort of a locally based company. Are you still kind of keeping in contact with them since the placement? Is it somewhere where you might look to kind of return to or keep in touch with them moving forward?
Yeah, I've definitely enjoyed my time at BHP. I will definitely be applying back there. Yeah, I've got all my seniors on LinkedIn, and I do see the like job updates. So for example, September is usually promotion season. So as I left, I got a nice little update that everyone was getting promoted. I was just congratulating everyone. And yeah, it's quite nice to see like little updates on people you've worked with for past year.
Thanks, Anna. It's a really important point about sort of staying connected. We think we've heard everyone talk about, to some extent staying connected with the work colleagues. And again, it's that opportunity to partly build your professional network. Some really good comments in the chat as well. So Jack's kind of talked about, again, being able to take your placement and actually applying that to final year dissertation. Quite a lot of people do that. Obviously, for some projects, it's not possible. Kira's mentioned some people might be under a non-disclosure agreement if they've worked on a highly sensitive business project. Particularly, we have people who've worked with, Ministry of Defence or kind of governments or the military, or even kind of businesses who want to kind of keep those things commercially private. But there are opportunities to really apply placement learning to your final year. So it's good to hear that people are doing that as well. We're kind of coming towards sort of the end. So, I mean, we've talked about quite a lot of these already sort of in between, some of the questions. So I think really, I suppose, before we kind of round up and take some more questions from people who are on the call, it'd be really useful just to get some kind of top tips, both for the recording and for people who are here today, from all of our placement reps. Just in terms of people who are in the same position, who are searching for placements this year, what would the kind of top tips be for you? So I think maybe this time, if we start with Jack, if I can come to you first, any kind of top tips, any learnings, reflections from your year, both kind of searching for placements and being on placement that you would give?
So I might just break them up into like, in terms of finding a placement, don't take no for an answer. And I know that sounds so cliche, but literally, if they say no, then ask them for feedback, see why, and then bounce on from that. But when you're on placement, especially for someone like me, from cybersecurity as a background, try and learn as much as you can on like different topics. Like I've learned about how our hospital networks work. I've learned how ultrasounds connect to the network. I've learned all sorts about medical devices and software. So just take on placement. If they throw everything at you about knowledge, just eat it up, basically, like it's a buffet, Nice
analogy, Jack. I love it. Yeah. But yeah, no, really good advice. And I think, you know, again, as you've said, that sort of not taking no for an answer from the point of view of getting as much knowledge as you can, as many opportunities as you can, is really sensible. Lottie, can I bring you back in if that's okay? Any kind of top tips for our placement seekers who are sort of watching this right now? Could be kind of top tips for the application process, or just more generally people who are considering placement.
My top tip takeaway from a placement is it's who you know, not what you know, because I came in, I hadn't got a clue about my role. It was does not related to my degree really, other than the analytical side. And I've learned so many new skills, and sort of supporting what Jack said, just if you get an opportunity to work with a particular project or learn a new skill, then just jump at it. I've also been offered a grad role, and it was really weird because my recruiter was someone that I reached out to early on in my placement, and that I feel that was one of the most important things I did was network, and also before you get the placement, just try and build those connections sort of at the careers fair as well. But yeah, because you never know when they'll become useful.
Yeah, thanks, Lottie. It's such an important point. And I mentioned, obviously, we've got our kind of virtual careers fairs next week. And one of the options you get with those virtual careers fairs is to book one-to-one appointments with some of the employers, just 10-minute one-to-one video chats. That's so valuable. Even if, for example, they don't have any opportunities going, just building that connection, having a quick conversation about the company, connecting with them on LinkedIn, being able to use that network kind of moving forward. As Lottie says, you never know where those connections might lead. So it's really valuable advice. Kira, can we kind of come back to you? What kind of top tips do you have, again, maybe for people going through the application process, or kind of top takeaways from your time on placement?
It sounds really cheesy, and I know you probably hear this all the time, but honestly, just don't give up. Because I did apply to a lot of placements, and I was literally on the verge of just, because I always wanted to do a placement, like even before I started uni, if I did a course, I knew I wanted to include a placement in there somewhere. So being rejected from quite a few placements, it does get you down, and you kind of like, do I continue with this, or do I just go on to final year? But you can get a placement, like someone will be willing to hire you, you know. So just keep going at it, and you learn from past interviews what you can improve on next time. A lot of companies that I went to interviews for, they were quite big, so I don't know if that really had anything to do with it, but I didn't really get any feedback from it. So I kind of was just going out in the dark, looking back and reflecting on it and what I could improve on next time. But that obviously kind of helped. And I know it sounds stupid, but in terms of like work-wise, don't always leave on, especially at the start, don't leave on your end time, because if you stay even just 15 minutes later, it shows that you care, and the employers take that into consideration and are willing to put more time and effort into you than compared if you just leave, I don't know, say 4 o'clock on the dot like my end time was. So yeah, I had quite a few different application processes, and one of them was assessment centre. And I know the employability careers fair, they do practice runs, and they even do practice runs of interviews. And I would actually suggest, if you really want to go for a job, sign up and ask for them to take you through an interview process or assessment centre, because it is quite helpful. I was nervous for the assessment centre, but even just doing a basic one kind of calmed my nerves, even though it kind of wasn't to do with totally, because obviously they have to do it to everyone and not just your specific area. So just go to the practice ones, because they are helpful and they do give you confidence, basically.
Thanks, Kira. Thanks for the plug for the careers
No
deployment team. Appreciate it. Yeah, but really good points. Again, you know, every stage of the placement application process, you've got a named employability advisor attached to your course. You can have one-to-one appointments about things like the application form, CVs, cover letters, and as Kira's mentioned, we do practice interviews, practice assessment centres. It's all free, it's all on tap. You know, do take advantage of it. Number of people like Kira reflect that, you know, it can be really helpful having that dry run, you know, in a safe environment where you know the feedback is going to be honest, but equally, you know, it's not going to affect whether you get a placement opportunity or not. So it's great sometimes to have that dry run. Anna, can we come on to you next? Top tips for our placement seekers?
So just as Kira mentioned, I did use the careers advisors quite a bit in my second year. So I've had Philippa as my advisor in my second year. I've asked her to look at my CV, which she helped me improve. And I did do a couple of practice interviews with them, which got me quite useful feedback that I used in my actual interviews. Another thing is, if you've got interviews that you weren't successful at your placements, always email them and ask for feedback as to why they didn't offer you a placement. So for example, one of the experiences I've had is I've applied to do a placement at Hartshaw, and they've had 3 spaces and I was actually the 4th pick. So I've just missed out on that one. And I wouldn't have known that if I didn't ask for a follow-up or a bit of feedback as to why I wasn't picked. So that was quite useful. Another thing I would say is quite useful is you need to do a career mentoring scheme. Career mentors, I think it's called. I've had a personal development mentor last year, and he helped me quite a bit with looking for placements, and again with imposter syndrome, where I didn't feel like I was qualified to, I don't know, do a placement, become an assistant accountant, and he helped me quite a bit with that. And I think lastly, I would say is, if you're nervous to start, have a look on previous placement students on LinkedIn. So for example, BHP, they've had a placement recruit from SHU as well. Her name was Anna, and she started in September, whereas I started in January. So I did drop her a message, and I was just asking her, what can I expect in my first week? What kind of things are they looking for? And just things like that.
That's great, Anna. Really, really useful feedback. And what we'll do is we'll pop the link to the career mentoring program into the chat at the end. So that's still recruiting until the 24th of October for this year. And great scheme, allows you to get paired with an industry professional to have a series of kind of touch points over the year. So again, also likely to be very, very supportive if you're applying for placements. So thanks for kind of, thanks for the plug there, Anna, as well. Finally, last but not least, Erin, your final kind of top tips for placement seekers before we round off the event today.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. It's sort of an obvious one, but just show a lot of enthusiasm and throw yourself into it. And that applies to the application process and when you secure your placement. Like, the company you're applying for want to see enthusiasm. That's like what they want. They want you to be interested in their role and have a willingness to do your best in the role. And you don't have to be the most confident person ever. Like, confidence is a really tricky thing and nerves are normal. But as long as you show enthusiasm and also try to step out of your comfort zone. Like for me, like calling prospective customers saying, oh, are you interested in our product? That is the scariest thing ever. And you feel like you're bothering them, and sometimes you can get customers that aren't as nice as others, and it knocks you back. But just perseverance, stepping out of your comfort zone, and enthusiasm, I'd say some of the most important things.
That's great. Thanks, Erin. Yeah, I would agree. And I think, that's kind of one of the benefits, as we've heard all of our reps talk about, is, behind an industry placement, is it takes you out of the comfort zone, that what can be a bit of a bubble sometimes, within sort of academic education, allows you to apply that in industry, but also, experience things you haven't experienced before. And as Lottie mentioned, maybe things outside of your course, so picking up lots of new skills that, you might not have developed otherwise. So fantastic responses from everyone. Really, really great to kind of have all of the insights from our placement reps today. We're going to be concluding the recording in a second. Jack, thanks for those comments in there. Yeah, sandwich placement does always make me laugh because, people do always ask, what is the sandwich? But we'll finish the recording there in a second, and we'll pick up any final questions before we kind of end the Zoom. I'll make sure I put the links in the chat we've talked about in terms of things like the career mentoring scheme. But for the purpose of the recording, and just for everyone that's here, just to say, a huge thank you to our placement reps. Give us all a wave. Thanks so much for your time, Jack, Kira, Erin, Anna, and Lottie. Thanks so much for joining us today. Just before we kind of finish the recording, we won't bother with that because I forgot to share it, but people were sharing their questions in the chat anyway, so that was absolutely fine. So just kind of a quick reminder that we still have a Placement Action Week kind of hub on MyHallam. I've included the link on the slides that we'll send out after the session. This includes lots of useful links. UniHub definitely shouldn't be on there, as Jack's rightly pointed out. It is now Handshake, and that will be changed on the image that we actually have on the actual website. And again, that's got all the information about some of the other events we've run as part of Placement Action Week, and things like our placement reps and how you can get in touch with them. And a reminder that we've actually got some really good videos that have just recently been created from other placement reps across the university, representing different courses. These are sort of kind of 2 to 3 minute videos with reps just like the kind of students we've had on today, talking about their placement experience and top tips for placement seekers. That's all available on YouTube as a playlist now, if you want to have a look through it. But all that really remains to be said is thanks very much for joining us. I'll stop the recording here, and we'll stay on, if that's okay, with our placement reps just for another couple of minutes to pick up any final questions people have.